Chris Carter here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Now that the bye week is done, it's time to look forward. First, before we get to the trade deadline talk, I want to talk about this pass defense and one aspect that I think could really help it take a step forward. And we will talk about the trade deadline as well as what happened all in the AFC North here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Steelers, your daily Pittsburgh Steelers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, bringing you your daily dose of all things in the Pittsburgh Steelers. As always, you can find the show on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe to this YouTube channel to get all of your daily Monday through Friday episodes, as well as our bonus content. We thank you for making us your first listen every day because we're your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. With a big return, you can get a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. All right, Steelers fans, you had the bye week. Everyone got a chance to rest up. Well, now the Steelers are back in action this week against the Washington Commanders, and it should be a very interesting game throughout the week. And one thing that everyone's going to be looking at is the Steelers pass defense against young quarterback Jaden Daniels. The Commanders now 7-2 after beating the Giants 27-22. And they are, and this is going to be having everyone looking at like, okay, the Steelers pass defense, can they lock things down? Now, the Steelers as a defensive whole right now, giving up the second fewest points in the league, 14.9 points per game. Still a great rate. The only team ahead of them is the Chargers, whose defense continues to lock people down. We'll talk about their game against the Browns in a bit. But everyone's looking at, if you're looking at this defense, the run defense can be a little bit concerning because they gave up a couple plays here and there. I still think those are plays that are in front of them that they can handle. The pass defense, though, is where we've talked about, and we did this with Nick Farabaugh last week, we've talked about where the Steelers can still make significant improvements. Right now, they're giving up 219.8 passing yards per game. That's in the bottom third of the league. Now, again, they're making it not matter because they're getting other things done. But I truly think that part of what this defense needs to do, if it really wants to take the next step forward, improve from how it started, which was a very good start, if we're being honest, they're going to need to tighten up the discipline on pass defense, especially with some of the teams that they're facing in the second half of their season. I mean, you look at the teams they got, the Commanders, their passing offense is pretty tough. You look at the Ravens and how they've improved with Lamar Jackson. You look at the Bengals with Joe Burrow twice, Jalen Hurts, Patrick Mahomes, big name quarterback after big name quarterback. They need to be prepared to not be exposed when they face those teams. And I think part of it is making sure that the miscommunication breakdowns that we saw happening earlier in the season are a thing of the past. They specifically showed up against the Colts and the Cowboys and cost them in those games. There were flashes of it, I think, in other games, but things that weren't overly concerning. But now against these better teams, they're going to try to find those ways to pick at your defense, and they have to be ready. Now, one aspect about this that I think that the Steelers need to, if they are able to shore these things up, if they're able to be more disciplined, teams are going to have to start forcing the ball in areas that they typically don't want to force. For example, right now, the most targeted players on the Steelers defense are Donte Jackson and Beanie Bishop. Now, Beanie Bishop has taken advantage of that. He's got 3 interceptions in the last 2 games. He's kind of shown, hey, you throw it my way, I can take advantage. I can take advantage of some mistakes. Donte Jackson has done the same at times, but Donte Jackson and Beanie Bishop also have been beat. And I think that this is where the Steelers defense needs to show up, is to avoid those situations where sometimes you get beat because the other receiver is just that quick and you're just not you're not as great of a lockdown corner, and that's just a really talented guy that just beats you. But other times there are fundamental things that you can do that would keep you in a better position and allow you to be in a better spot to make a play on the ball. And those are things I think I see a little bit out of Donte Jackson, but definitely out of Beanie Bishop at times. Beanie Bishop, rookie, I think he's doing a great job right now overall. Donte Jackson, a vet, I think he's done a very solid job, for a vet coming in, and he's playing well. But the thing is you looking at those targets. Donte Jackson's been targeted 39 times, Beanie Bishop 38 times. Out of all the players on the Steelers roster who have been on the field in coverage for at least 100 snaps this season, the least targeted player is, of course, Minkah Fitzpatrick. He's been targeted 15 times while playing 310 snaps in the passing game. Teams are actively avoiding him. And I think part of what's happening here, and people are going to point out, well, he hasn't made an interception yet. Yeah, he doesn't have too many chances to make an interception because teams are trying to, if they're throwing it in his direction, the player is well underneath him in coverage or, away from enough that he's having to come up and just make the tackle after the throw. But if the Steelers want to force teams to throw his direction more often, they're going to need to get pressure faster. They're going to need to take away some of those underneath passes, and they're going to need to play faster so that teams have to speed up their decision-making and quarterbacks start making more mistakes. I think a really good clip that we played way back when the Steelers lost to the Cowboys and I was in the Steelers locker room afterwards kind of gets to that point when we were talking about Minkah Fitzpatrick, about what the Steelers need to do. Here was Minkah Fitzpatrick. I want you to listen to how he addressed this when we were talking about it back then. Excuse some of the minutia of the game itself, but listen to how he talks about what the defense needs to do better.
Towards the end of the game, they were running the ball well. We're allowing them to get a lot of yards after catch. Miscommunication. Just all stuff that usually we do at a high level. We didn't do it at a high level tonight.
What was going wrong on third down tonight?
First half was miscommunication. There was a couple times where we're playing check ball and a couple guys are playing different games. People just not in the right spots. Second half, I'm not really sure. Yeah.
Minkah, how do you guys clean that up? Seemed like that was also an issue last week late against the Colts.
I think we just got to play simple defense. You know what I'm saying? We got a lot of talent in the secondary, a lot of guys that could, play man, play zone. We just got to make a play call, simplify it, and play fast, allow us to play fast.
Now, getting to Minkah's point there, saying that you got to simplify the play call and play fast, that's something that I hear a lot of coaches talk about, specifically in college. That's something that I talk to Pat Narduzzi, Pitt's head coach, about all the time. He says, hey, when you get too complicated, guys start thinking too much, and then they're not playing fast. They're not flying to the ball. They're not being aggressive, and that's what you want generally from a defense in football. But when I asked Mike Tomlin, then he kind of pushed back. He was like, hey, you know what? That's why we're coaches. Our job is to we want you to play fast, but we also want to confuse the team, because if you're too simple, then they start to pick you apart and they just find natural ways to take advantage of you. And that's where I think the Steelers have to find this balance. And if they do, it will force teams to try to attack the field in areas where Minkah Fitzpatrick is more often, and give him more chances to be that X factor player that he really hasn't had a chance to be all this season and much of last season as well when he was hurt. So I look at what the Steelers are doing right now, and maybe part of the answer is Cameron Sutton, who is back for the Steelers and is going to be active for this upcoming game. Now, how quickly will he be worked into the defense? I don't know for sure, but he is active. He knows their system. He was only away for a year, and then he was suspended for the first 8 games this year. I think he could be a plug-and-play player who helps out, and maybe he takes away Beanie Bishop's spot. Maybe he doesn't, because Beanie Bishop has been playing well the last few games. Or maybe he's rotated in with Donte Jackson at times to give different looks at outside cornerback, or maybe he takes Terrell Edmonds' spot as sort of that extra DB on the field. Either way, where Cam Sutton, I think, comes in and can add to this is he'll be another player who's really good at communication. Cam Sutton, I think his best skill is his overall football knowledge and awareness, and how to apply himself into each play to work with what the defense is doing. He was a big asset for the Steelers when he did that, when he wasn't having to be the number one corner, like he was when he went to Detroit. And now I think with the Steelers, he'll get that chance again. Maybe not to be the number 2 corner or anything like that, but to be a piece of the puzzle that's really good at communicating, that's really good at being in the right spots. And he could be one of those guys where, hey, like, you think you're going to pick on the slot here, you think you're going to pick on this spot over there. No, they're going to take that away, and they're going to force you to have to hold the ball for just a little bit longer. And then eventually, when the pressure's getting to you, you're going to have to make tough decisions. And eventually, when quarterbacks make more and more tough decisions, they start to put the ball in places they typically wouldn't want to. They'd be trying to game plan away from. Now, again, the Steelers defense has done a very good job to start the season, but they can still do a great job. And that's where I think the Steelers have to improve in this second half of the season. We talked about with Nick Farabaugh last week about how maybe they are saving some of their tricks in the back pocket as far as different blitz looks and different coverage disguises for their AFC North opponents. We'll see. But I think this would be a good week for them to try to show that, hey, bye week's done, got some things in order, got Cam Sutton back. Now it's time to get active, make better moves, and be a much better pass defense than they were in the first half of the season. So we'll see what happens there, and we'll see what Mike Tomlin says on Tuesday about that kind of stuff as the Steelers get ready for the Commanders. But of course, with the trade deadline Tuesday itself at 5 p.m., we're going to talk about what the Steelers' outlook is there. There was some work in the rumor mills about the Steelers wanting to make moves at wide receiver over the weekend. Well, as of this recording, if you're listening to this on Monday, they have less than 24 hours, or maybe a little more 24 hours if you're listening to the morning, but they have less than 2 days to get a trade done, something that everyone's been talking about since the draft when they got Roman Wilson as their lone receiver, and people wondered what's going to happen with the lack of a Donte Johnson next to George Pickens. We'll talk about all that on the other side of the first break here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Chris Carter here. Stick with us. We'll be right back. But first, remind you, this show is also brought to you by Robinhood Gold. You don't need a silver spoon to eat up the financial favors of the 1% when you have Robinhood Gold. Robinhood Gold allows others to get the rates and perks usually reserved for the high society. Now, the resourceful individual with Robinhood Gold can earn the very liberal rate of 4.5% APY on uninvested cash, receive unlimited 1% deposit bonuses, and be rewarded with a handsome 3% retirement boost on an IRA account. Robinhood Gold provides the privileges of a high net worth for any net worth. These generous benefits are now available only for $5 a month. The new gold standard is here with Robinhood Gold. Sign up at Robinhood.com/gold. Terms apply. For product-specific disclosures, visit Robinhood.com/gold. Investing involves risk. Rate may change. Gold membership is offered by Robinhood Gold, LLC. We're also brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Unlike other apps on Prize Picks, it's just you against the numbers. You're not battling against thousands of other players with sharks and people that know what they're doing and playing the numbers games. All you're looking at is picking 2 to 6 players, and between those 2 to 6 players, you just guess more or less on the stat projections given to you by Prize Picks itself. It's that simple. Prize Picks is the fun new daily fantasy game that everyone needs to start playing right now. Prize Picks is the only real money daily fantasy platform with any injury insurance policy. Your lineups stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. If your player leaves in the first half and doesn't return because of an injury, Prize Picks keeps your lineup alive. And now, on Prize Picks, you can win up to 100 times your money with as little as making 4 correct picks. Prize Picks includes NFL, NBA, MLB, NHL, college sports, and so much more. Download the Prize Picks app or go to prizepicks.com to sign up and play daily fantasy sports. That's prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL. Use code LockedOnNFL, and you'll get $50 instantly when you play just $5. That's code LockedOnNFL to receive a $50 bonus for just playing $5. Prize Picks. Run your game. We're back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. We continue our show here as the Steelers get ready for the trade deadline. Again, 5 p.m. Eastern time Tuesday is when all the trade talk will close. But the Steelers reportedly were getting a little active in the trade game, and that came partially from a report from Adam Schefter, who said the Steelers were in talks with the Jaguars about Christian Kirk and getting him from them over the weekend, but his concussion kind of soured that, and that the Steelers were a serious player, at least according to Schefter, when it came to trying to target him, and that the Steelers are in the market for a wide receiver. And that's something that we've talked about on the show, right? Like we said, like, hey, they want to be, but they're not going to oversell what they have to do to get a receiver. They're trying to be in a good position to get a solid receiver that's going to pair with George Pickens and not cost them a ton of draft capital, while also not really destroying their future salary cap. So now that you take Christian Kirk off the table, it's another target that the Steelers had that didn't work out. You know, people talked about Cooper Kupp. Well, the Rams won. They also won again on this past Sunday, so they're really rocking right now. But you know, player after player that didn't work out in Pittsburgh. Devontae Adams didn't want to come. He wanted to go play with Aaron Rodgers. You know, there's different guys. Brandon Ayuk was another name that everyone wanted to talk about. He's out for the season with the Niners right now. Thing after thing has not worked for the Steelers in getting their number 2 wide receiver. And again, it's clear that they would like to if it could work. but it just hasn't worked just yet. And so now you start to look around and you start to say, okay, what are other moves the Steelers could make? Well, one such move that I know everyone was chomping at the bit about on social media was potentially trading with the Seahawks for DK Metcalf. Now, here's the thing about that, guys. Listen, DK Metcalf, heck of a talented receiver, really good dude. The Seahawks are only one game out of the division, out of first place in the division. They're 4-5. The Cardinals are 5-4. Granted, the Seahawks have also started 1-4 in their conference and 0-2 in their division, so that's a rough start. But I know that DK Metcalf is a really talented player. He's a physical specimen of a player, but I just have a hard time seeing them letting him go. But hey, if he's on the market, what does he go for? That'd certainly be an interesting question. I just think that they're not gonna just let that fly. He also has one more year left on his deal after this season. As it stands right now, I believe he would be a $10.8 million hit on whoever picks him up next year if all the dead money did stay with the Seahawks. So, I mean, that's a reasonable deal there. You'd get him for the second half of this season, and then you'd get him for one more season after that at age 28. And that gives you time to figure out, hey, what do you want to do with George Pickens? Is this your guy, your long-term? And it also gets Russell Wilson a familiar target. So there's merit there. But again, what draft capital are you spending to get him? And that's where I have a hard time seeing this actually happening. If the Steelers came in and offered a third for DK Metcalf, I know some people will say a second, and honestly, I think DK Metcalf's good enough to, warrant a second round pick. I just don't know if the Steelers want to give that up right now, considering that they're still rebuilding their team, and they've done really well with their top picks, in the first two drafts under Omar Khan. Guys are regularly contributing. We talked about that last week. So DK Metcalf is one name I've seen get thrown out there. Adam Thielen's another name. I don't think Adam Thielen really moves the needle that much for the Steelers. If they bring him in, it's just kind of another guy. DK Metcalf would move the needle. He's a playmaker wide receiver. He would give you a whole different option across from George Pickens. And I think that could be really interesting to see. Darius Slayton from the Giants who again lost this past weekend to the Commanders. Maybe there's something there they could work out with Slayton. Jakobi Meyers from the Raiders is a name that I've seen a lot of people bring up. I don't know. I don't know what the Raiders would be asking for him, considering they're not in competition in their division. They're pretty much out of it. Maybe because his contract is up in 2025. Maybe that's a place where the Steelers could go as Jakobi Meyers. But make no mistake, I do think that the Steelers are on the phones working the calls right now to get to try to find any option at wide receiver that would help them balance out their room moving forward and give them an option in case George Pickens goes down. Because to me, that's also a big part of this, is not just trying to get a talented receiver, who could be a number two. Is getting a person who, that if George Pickens has to miss a game or two, if he misses the whole season, that's pretty much a wash anyways, because that he's one of your biggest playmakers. But if you need to survive for a game or two without him, you need a guy who could take the reins there. And again, I think Calvin Austin is showing that, hey, he's much better than people give him credit for. He's been getting open a lot more regularly, and I think Calvin Austin will benefit from Russell Wilson being on the field. He'll see him more often in some of those spaces and get him the ball quicker and more accurately than what Calvin Austin's dealt with for most of his time in Pittsburgh. So all that being said, I think the Steelers have opportunities to make moves before the trade deadline. There are plays there, but again, I just have a hard time seeing it actually play out for them to get a big name wide receiver to bring into Pittsburgh and to break the news cycle. And hey, if they do, we'll be here covering it on the Locked On Steelers podcast, and you can tell me I'm wrong. But I still think the Steelers are going to exhibit patience. I still think that they're going to try. Omar Khan's whole thing here is he wants to make sure he gets the right value. And if it's an overvalued thing, I don't think Omar Khan should go for that. They should try to be patient, continue to develop their guys. And again, I think that with George Pickens, Calvin Austin, I think Van Jefferson's also a solid body to have, who can, if he gets open, he can make the catch and make the play. Pat Fryermuth's dangerous. I think Darnell Washington, Jalen Warren, Najee Harris, they have weapons in this offense. It's just about, can they put it together? Can the quarterback see the field enough to put it together and to give them a chance at it? We'll see as the start of the week continues whether or not the Steelers are big players in the trade market leading up to the deadline. It's going to be a crazy 2 days here before that deadline hits. We'll have you covered here all week long, all year long on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Stick with us. When we come back, I'll talk about what happened in the AFC North this weekend and how it impacts the Steelers and what it means for their schedule moving forward, all here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. But first, remind you, the show is also brought to you by Hillsdale College. Time is the most precious commodity, so don't waste it by scrolling through some mind-numbing content for hours and hours. How can you spend it wisely to improve yourself? Well, check out Hillsdale College. They offer more than 40 free online courses, including Constitution 101, Intro to Free Market Economics, and the Great American Story, Rise and Fall of the Roman Republic, and so much more. All Hillsdale's courses are self-paced so that you can start whenever and tune in wherever. Plus, you can go deeper with readings, quizzes, discussions, or just enjoy the lectures. Go right now to hillsdale.edu/lockedon to enroll. There's no cost, and it's easy to get started. So go to hillsdale.edu/lockedon to register. hillsdale.edu/lockedon. We're also brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the #1 sportsbook in America. FanDuel Sportsbook is the place you got to go to if you're going to place bets on anything coming up. And with the Steelers back in action, let's look at the numbers that they have in their upcoming road contest with the Washington Commanders. Well, the Steelers are back to being underdogs is what's happened there. FanDuel has made the Commissioners 2.5-point favorites at home. Granted, a field goal is always granted to the home team, so maybe this is more of a toss-up in talent-wise in FanDuel's eyes. But Steelers money line sitting there at plus 122, the Commanders sitting at minus 144, and the over-under is currently set at 44.5 points. Interesting numbers there. We'll see who takes advantage of that this weekend or this week before the game, and we'll keep you updated with the moving lines all week long on FanDuel Sportsbook, the #1 sportsbook in America. And you can get started today with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet today only on FanDuel. It's $150 in free bets today for new customers who, if you hit on just a $5 bet only on FanDuel.com. Just visit FanDuel.com to download America's #1 sportsbook. Back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, I'm your host, Chris Carter. Before I get started, I want to actually put this out there. As y'all know, during the season, things get a lot busier for me here. So sometimes I don't get to do all the extra content that I like to do on the Steelers and to get you guys involved in stuff. So with that being said, I want to open this back up to the public to see if there's any thoughts you guys have coming out of the bye week. And that's, of course, our Locked On Steelers call-in line. If you have any questions and you want to get your question on the show, call 412-223-6644. Leave your name, where you're from, and keep your question under a minute. I'm going to underline that. Keep your question under a minute, please. And again, the number is 412-223-6644, and give us your name and where you're from so we can say that in the show. But we're going to try to incorporate some of your calls in the coming weeks just to answer. We can't get them every day, but when we have time, we're going to try to work them in because we do like to interact with fans on the show. But that being said, let's get to the AFC North action that happened this weekend. The AFC North went 2-1 with the two teams that I thought would win, won, and the one team that I thought would lose, lost. And that, of course, were the Ravens, who I'll just say decimated the Broncos 41-10. I thought the Ravens would win. I thought the Broncos would put up a better fight than that. I was wrong about that. And the Ravens looked for real on both sides of the ball, shutting things down with the Broncos. But hey, this is what we said about the Ravens from the jump, right? Like, they're a talented team. They could blow out teams, but it's going to be about styles making fights. And can the Steelers be the team that takes the Ravens out of their style when they play? They've done it 7 of the last 8 times. Will they do it with Derrick Henry? We'll see how that moves forward. The other AFC North team that won were the Cincinnati Bengals. They won 41-24. This game looked over early, and then the Raiders started to score a little bit, and so it kind of made it a little bit closer. And there was a garbage time touchdown from Brock Bowers there in there as well. But the Bengals doing what they're supposed to do. Chase Brown had a big day on the ground. Joe Burrow, 5 touchdown passes. That just shows you how rough it's been for the Raiders defense. So looking at those numbers, that's a reminder. Hey, that's what the Steelers are going to have to be prepared for. It's why I made it the top target of the show, or top topic of the show for this week, today, because I think that the Steelers are going to need that defense to limit play like that from a guy like Joe Burrow. And again, he didn't throw an obsessive amount. He threw 39 times, including 27 for 251. But again, 251 passing yards, 5 passing touchdowns. That's pretty doggone efficient. And that's what the Steelers are going to have to contend with. Now, however, we say all that to say the Steelers are still in first place in the division, and they haven't played a division game. All the other division teams are 1-1. The Ravens are at 6-3. The Bengals are at 4-5, and the Browns are at 2-7. Woof. Do they look rough? And it makes that loss last week that the Ravens took to the Browns look even worse, because the Browns this week got smoked 27-10 by the Chargers. Justin Herbert throwing 2 touchdowns, no interceptions on his part. Jameis Winston, we said last week he threw a lot of interceptions that got dropped. Well, they didn't get dropped this week. Jameis Winston ended up being 26 of 46 for 235, 1 touchdown pass, but 3 interceptions. That's a rough place to be if you're Jameis Winston in this game when you're trying to prove yourself. But again, the Browns, I've said for a while, they were cooked. If you go back and you look at the AFC North Locked On predictions preseason thing, or whatever it was called, I said the Browns is going to finish in last place. They looking like they're going to finish in last place. Still got to play the Steelers twice. So let's take the Browns out of the equation. The Steelers have to keep pace if they want to be a dangerous team down the stretch. If they want to be in the driver position and not needing help, they have to keep pace with the Ravens. They need this win next week to kind of balance things out. But if they get it, it continues to put them in a good position to kind of make it about, hey, can we just beat these teams that we know very well because we play them every year? And if they can do those things, maybe there's some progress there. Maybe there's some hope there. But right now, as it stands, if you were to look at the playoff picture in the AFC, I believe, and this is accounting for all the games that happened Sunday. I'm recording this Sunday night as the Colts and Vikings are finishing up, Vikings being a winner there. As it stands, I believe that the Chiefs are still the number 1 seed. They play Monday night, though, so we'll see what happens there. But even if they lose on Monday Night Football, they're still behind, or they're still ahead of the Bills, who are at 7-2, while the Chiefs are 7-1. But right behind the Bills at 7-2 are the Steelers at 6-2, and that to me is a good sign. The Steelers are half game up on teams like the Ravens and the Texans, who are at 6-3. A whole game up on teams like the Chargers at 5-3 and the Broncos at 5-4. But again, the Steelers should feel comfortable at where they're at. They've earned their spot. Now it's just about keeping it. Now it's about fighting to show, hey, you can keep pace with those other teams. And if the Steelers come out in this, if the Steelers come out and they're able to play strong coming out of their break, and they're able to reel off some wins against the Commanders, Ravens, Browns, get 3 more wins. And I think it's going to be an undeniable topic if them getting 9 wins in 11 games, that everyone's going to start being like, okay, wait a second, this Steelers team is for real. So I do think the Steelers have flaws to them. I do think that they have issues that like everybody else, but I look at the issues with the Bengals in their games, and I just think, man, the Bengals, like, their offensive line, not great. Their defense, not great. And if the Steelers can control the line of scrimmage, pressure Joe Burrow beyond where he wants to be, I think it could be a rough day for the Bengals within the 2 times that they play Pittsburgh. But that's why they play the games. We'll keep you covered all week long here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. We will be taking your questions again. Call us in at 412-223-6644. Leave your name, where you're from. Keep your question under a minute. I can't promise that we're going to get everybody on the show. We're going to do our best, though, to get people on the show who call in. Thanks again for everyone who has been calling in. We will try to get that going very soon. Again, I'm Chris Carter. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Carter Critiques. Read my work at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, post-gazette.com. Find me here on the Locked On Steelers podcast every day, Monday through Friday, breaking down your Pittsburgh Steelers right here on the Locked On Steelers podcast.